truth. Right, let's move on. We want to look back on last night's 2-0 win for Manchester United at Stamford Bridge against Chelsea. Daniel Harris is with us this morning. Daniel, it just keeps getting a little bit better week after week. I mean, notwithstanding the PSG game, but this is exactly what you would have hoped for from a team who had suffered what Manchester United suffered against PSG. And it was as routine a win at Stamford Bridge as any team is ever going to have.
Yeah, the PSG game even, United stayed with them for the first half, and then when they lost a couple of important players, Solskjaer made the wrong changes. It was only once those two players went off that PSG looked to cut above United. Whereas Chelsea actually looked a lot like United of the last few seasons, where they started okay without threatening that much, and as soon as things went wrong, the result was only ever going one way, and they didn't really have anything they could do about it. And it's really strange watching Chelsea play. On the one hand, they're really Hazard and change anyway. That if you stop Hazard, if he doesn't have a good game, then Chelsea are going to struggle to score. But to see the way that Sarri keeps going about things, at half-time I tweeted that I was looking forward to seeing Willian come on for Pedro and Barkley to come on for Kovacic. And sure enough, that was what happened, followed by a right-back for a right-back. And what Sarri's saying in that situation is, my system is perfect for every single game, and the only thing that's going wrong is the players. But if you're the opposition, you know how Chelsea are going to play. There's no element of surprise, so you can stop that. And the players who play for Chelsea are sitting there thinking, every team knows what they're going to do, and the manager's going to do nothing from the bench to affect the flow of that game. And the manager has no silverware, has no illustrious career that speaks for his method. And Chelsea are a mess.
What is Sarri ball? How would you define it now at this point, apart from a failed experiment? But how would you define it?
Sarri ball, I wouldn't really accredit someone who's done what Sarri's done in the game as someone who deserves his name to be suffixed with ball. It's worked really well at one particular team. So the Sarri ball that we saw in Napoli was they played really fast, really quick football, moving the ball along the back four for as long as it took to suck the opposition in before getting it forward really quickly. But at Chelsea, he doesn't have the midfield for that. He doesn't really have the runners for that either. So what you see at Chelsea is you see a lot of possession and a lot of sideways passes, and a team that doesn't really look like they're now to score a goal.
Yeah. Do you feel like this is completely finished here at Chelsea for Maurizio Sarri, or is this actually one of those things where, contrary to all of the evidence that we've ever seen from the club, they will back the manager and ship out a lot of their players this summer?
That seems very unlikely. It seems more likely that he'll do well to see out. You'd be more surprised if he stayed in it for the full season or stayed into next season than if he got sacked this week. There's still quite a lot that can go wrong. They won't lose to Malmo on Thursday, but they could easily take another gubbing off Man City in the League Cup final. And if they do, that'll probably be it, because they want to make the top four. That doesn't look like it's going to happen. And the only way that it is going to happen is if they get rid of Sarri, probably, because the players aren't playing. It's not that the players aren't playing for him. It's not that they're not trying, but they don't look like they've got any confidence in what he's doing and what they're doing. And they don't look like they lost 4-0 to Bournemouth. They lost 6-0 to Manchester City. Like, those are not excusable results, particularly if they come in quick, close proximity to one another. And last night, after United scored, the game was over. And there's no way that's not sustainable.
Let's move on to Manchester United, because there were some changes to the team from what looks like the first team. Some of it injury enforced, some of it just because who knows? Maybe he wants to see what he's got with a few of these players. But it does begin to look like there isn't only one first choice team for Manchester United. Let me rephrase that. He has some depth, which is even slightly better than maybe we thought it was in the first place.
I think, he does have some depth, but in the end, it's likely to be the same players that win you the games. So, although he was without Lingard and Martial, and in the first 20 minutes that showed. United played okay. It was a relatively even game. Chelsea perhaps had the better of it. Like, Higuain's header was the best chance of that period. But in the end, United had Pogba and had Rashford, and those were the two best offensive players on the pitch, and they are fixtures of Mourinho's first 11. And the midfield that he played is his first choice midfield. So I think that he does have some options. So Mata played quite well yesterday. Lukaku didn't play so well, because those are players that you can bring on and they might be able to change the game because they're different to what you've got. Or they're players that you can start who might do something because they're not rubbish, but you wouldn't be wanting to start two of them like you had to do last night in any big game. But the difference last night was that instead of starting them in a Mourinho front three with Mata on the right, Rashford on the left and Lukaku in the middle, he played them in a diamond which played to their strengths, and I think you saw the difference.
Where did Mata play, at the tip of the diamond or on the left side?
Yeah, Mata's tips. Oops, I don't really want to say that very much, but Mata played at the tip of the diamond, and he didn't play that well. But just having a player there means that Jorginho can't do that much, and Mata, perhaps the only player in the whole Premier League who's less athletic than Jorginho, stopped Jorginho from really doing anything, and that showed up Chelsea's system again. And I mean, Mata sat on Jorginho when United played Chelsea in the league when Mourinho was the manager, and the same thing worked pretty well then. But United's two centre-backs played really well. Luke Shaw played really well, and United were too strong in midfield once they got going. And they had the class of Pogba and the class of Rashford, and it was actually a really interesting performance from Rashford, who, it was almost a Wayne Rooney style performance, where particularly in the second half he was a one-man forward line, and Chelsea couldn't really deal with him. Every time he got the ball, even when he just looked like he was going to put it into space, because as soon as he puts a defender in a race with him, it's pretty much over. And they couldn't handle him. He was constantly in the game, and he was able to focus the game almost around him. And it's only very special players that are able to do that.
Yeah, it definitely looks like he's progressing much more quickly under Solskjaer than you might have anticipated. Because obviously the talent was there, but generally young players like this, it takes them quite a while to get to grips. The number of minutes he's playing, the confidence that he gets from being first choice, that's all having an immediate dividend.
Yeah, I think so. Although he actually, in the dog days of Mourinho, just before the end, in the last few weeks, you could see that he'd taken it up a level. He was starting to affect games. He was starting to, not affect games, but he was starting to impose himself on games at the crucial moment. And I think it was always likely that as soon as his hold-up play improved, that was going to be able to be the case, because he had almost all the other attributes. The finishing, he's not the greatest finisher, but he was always going to improve the finishing. But once he could make the ball stick when it came to him, then everything else is in place, because he's got ridiculous pace, he's got great imagination, he combines well with the other players, he can run with the ball, he's got tricks, he can shoot from distance. So once he was able to make the ball stick so that he was in the game more, there was just so much more that he was going to be able to do. And that's not an improvement that's come from Solskjaer. I think that's an improvement that's come from him, because we saw it. We saw it when things were really bad under Mourinho. Of course, under Solskjaer, he's got the confidence of knowing that he's number one, and you're seeing that in the goals and the things he's prepared to try. But just that one element of retaining possession when he gets it is facilitating all the other things that we know he's got.
We talked about Ander Herrera before the PSG game. I was keeping an eye on what the Man United fans in the office were saying, and they were very annoyed with his performance against PSG, and they kind of seem to still be holding some stuff against him from the first 18 months of his career at Man United. But it does feel like, again, he's getting better and better, and they're beginning to understand a bit more about what potential he has and what role he might have in the team into the future.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't hold the PSG game against him, because he's just not that level of player, and he's never going to be. So it's hard to hold against a player things that they can't do. And when we spoke before the PSG game, I said that United would have to do it early, because eventually Verratti would take over midfield. And when that happened, United were going to be in trouble. And although it was also precipitated by Lingard and Martial going off, that meant PSG could commit men forward and not worry too much about the counter, it was just also the case that PSG upped the pace in midfield, and United didn't have the players to deal with that. And Herrera is a good player. He's got a lot of attributes. He really understands the game. He's got a good touch. He's tenacious. He's committed. He orders around the players that are around him. He leads the press, all of that bollocks. But at the end of it, he's not as good a player as Marco Verratti. He's not as good. He's not a high-level player. He's a good player. So last night you saw him wringing the most from his talent, and he has got talent, but against PSG it's unlikely to matter. And the problem with United's midfield, and feel bad almost criticising it after a game like last night where United's midfield was so good, is that You want Pogba to do Pogba things, to do what Pogba does. And you can get away with that against most teams in the Premier League. But against a top-level European team, Pogba being a superhero and basically doing things that decide the game, but not helping you control the game, you're going to need a better and more athletic player than the man, Matic, and ideally a better player than Herrera as well, because there's a lot of running involved, and also you need to retain possession. And that's actually not just a problem of those players, it's also a problem of the defenders. You need to be able to play the ball into midfield well in the first place, not just be looking for hopeful passes. And that's the area, the main area that I'd be looking to strengthen if I was buying United's players in the summer. For me, like, the main thing that has to be done is they need to upgrade Matic. If you upgrade Matic, and if you find that elusive player who can run like Paul Ince and who can pass like Roy Keane, then that would make United a much better team. But that's hard to do, but that is the main change. And if United were able to do that, it would cover a multitude of sins in the defence.
Well, if Chelsea will sell them Matic, maybe perhaps they might sell them N'Golo Kante in the summer, who knows. But I guess that does lead the question. You want to use and keep Paul Pogba as a building block, as somebody you're going to build the rest of the team around. So you identify the type of players that you need to make sure that he can do what he does. Or do you decide that actually, if you do want to be the best team in Europe, that it's great having a Pogba, but actually it would be much better having a different combination of types of players?
Not necessarily. Like, I think if you found the right player to replace Matic, what you could do is you could play Lingard and Pogba in midfield. You'd then need more work from Pogba to appreciate the fact that there was another bloke in there who could also affect the game. But the person you would need would need to be a monster. They'd need to be a passer and a runner. And those players are hard to find. I can't particularly think of one. That doesn't mean they don't exist, but you need someone similar in style probably to Roy Keane, who was able to set the tempo of the play by being a brilliant passer of the ball, but could also cover a lot of ground. I think that if you're trying to get United up to that elite level, you definitely don't get rid of by far the best player in the team, that is Pogba. You need more players of Pogba's quality, not fewer players of Pogba's quality. The question is finding the best format for that. And there are lots of ways to play. So in general, the teams that are going to do well in European competition are teams that are going to control possession. But then Liverpool got to the final last year, and they're not particularly that sort of team. They did it by running the other team off the pitch, which I guess you're also unlikely to do if you've got Pogba. But then another way of doing it is you might buy a centre-back. You buy a back four that could defend the box really well. And you'd strengthen, if United were going to do that, they'd probably want to buy 2, maybe 3 defenders and try and defend really well, and then try and win the big moments of the game. So there are lots of ways of doing it, but I think the main thing is if you were to buy a replacement for Matic, then you would have to decide if you wanted another midfield player to replace Herrera, or you try and put Lingard into midfield and buy a right winger.
The reports seem to be suggesting that it's nearly a fait accompli, nearly a done deal that Solskjaer is going to be the new manager. Do you buy that?
I don't know if it's nearly a fait accompli, because I don't know if can it nearly be a fait accompli. I don't know. Is that tautology? My French isn't that good. Bollocks, but that's about all the French I've got. But if you things can still go very wrong. It just doesn't look like they're likely to. If he gets 4th place, then it seems it'll be very difficult for them to do anything else, because there's already been this very good winning run, and the performances in that winning run in the main are improving. So if you look at the big games United have played, at Spurs, they hung in there and got away with it. Arsenal obviously aren't as good as Spurs, but United played better against Arsenal, showing more control. And then last night they played better than that. So we'll see what they come up with against Liverpool at the weekend. But sometimes it's just a case of right bloke, right man, right time. So if you think about Pep Guardiola, for example, when he got the job at Barcelona, he hadn't proved his worth for that job. And if he'd started at Cadiz, who are, let's say, a Cardiff level club, perhaps he wouldn't have been able to do it, because different times and different places work for different managers. So Manchester United in 1986, in the end, turned out to be the perfect place for Alex Ferguson. Would he have achieved the same if he'd ended up somewhere else? You don't know, because different jobs demand different skill sets. And what it does seem is that Solskjaer has a really good skill set for this job. He understands what people want. He understands what the supporters want. He understands how to get the best out of his best players. He understands how to change his tactics to exploit the weaknesses of different teams. And as Manchester United manager, those are really good things that you need to be able to do, because generally your players are going to be better than the players that you're playing against. And so it might just be a case of right man, right time. If they ended up going and giving the job to Mauricio Pochettino, let's say, then it would be hard to argue with that, or even Massimiliano Allegri. Again, you can't really argue with that. Those blokes have done really well and earned the job if it's a job that they want, and if United can bring them in to do it. But if Solskjaer finishes fourth, as a supporter, I would want him to get the job. As a football writer, I would be able to write 1,200 words explaining why I thought that was a decision that was justified. So the club are now in a really good position. And the thing is it seems to me really unlikely that Ed Woodward was sitting there watching Mould thinking, perhaps we get this Solskjaer bloke in for Mourinho. It seems much more likely that he took some advice off, who knows, perhaps a plutocrat from Govan. And if Fergie will know that he dropped a bollock in Moyes. If he were to think that Solskjaer would be the right person to get the job, that would be probably a fairly decent recommendation. And he hasn't really put a foot wrong. He changed the team against Burnley. That was a mistake. Managed to get out of it and show that his team had some bollocks. He probably got the changes wrong against PSG at half time, but they're outclassed by a better team with superior resources. So that was a what can you do situation. And similarly, as he did against Burnley, he's turned that into a positive by coming back and producing a performance like last night.
Dan, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
No worries, see you again.
Daniel Harris giving us some thoughts on the Manchester United situation last night. If you want to get in touch this morning, you can just use the hashtag OTB AM, or you can always get us on Twitter as well. Now,